Today, we are diving into a period that completely reshaped the modern world. And it didn't do it with armies or with empires, but with the pure, raw power of thought. We're talking about the Enlightenment, a true revolution of the mind.
So let me just start by asking you this. What if the most powerful weapon, the most powerful force for real change, wasn't a sword, but an idea? Well, that's the whole bet the Enlightenment made. This pretty radical belief that human reason could stand up to centuries of tradition and build a better world, literally from the ground up. And this slide just perfectly captures the huge shift we're talking about. Look, on one side, you've got the world of authority, a society locked into a rigid hierarchy, kings and peasants, all built on unquestioning faith and tradition. But the Enlightenment, it championed a totally different world, a world of reason, built on these brand new concepts like liberalism, science, and the power of the individual. This was a head-on collision with the old way of doing things. Okay, so let's set the stage a little. In our first section, An Age of New Light, we're going to look at what it really meant to step out of a world that was pretty much run by superstition and into one that was being lit up by science and reason.
So what was the Enlightenment exactly? Well, technically, it's an intellectual movement from the 17th and 18th centuries. But what made it so revolutionary was its mission, to make reason the ultimate source of authority. The point wasn't just to sit around and think new thoughts. No way. The goal was to actually use those thoughts to reform society, to push knowledge forward, and to tear down centuries of prejudice.
All right, let's move into our next section, the mind's new rules. Because, if you're going to have a revolution of the mind, you first need some new tools for thinking. So we're going to look at the philosophers who actually built this new toolkit. And really, it all kicks off right here, with René Descartes, who we often call the father of modern philosophy. This guy decided to doubt everything. Literally everything. His senses, what he'd been taught, the very world around him. He peeled it all back until he found the one single thing he could not possibly doubt. And what was that? The simple fact that he was the one doing the doubting. I think, therefore I am. That was it. The solid ground to build a whole new way of knowing. And this core idea led to a whole philosophy called rationalism. To put it simply, it's the belief that pure reason, not what you see or what someone tells you, is the true path to knowledge. The idea was, if something is clear and logical in your mind, like 2 + 2 = 4, it has to be true. It doesn't matter what tradition says or even what your own eyes are telling you. But then, on the flip side, another powerful idea came along, empiricism. And thinkers like John Locke argued the complete opposite. Locke said, nope, the mind isn't born with any ideas. He famously called it a tabula rasa, a blank slate. All our knowledge, he said, comes from experience, from what we see, hear, taste, and touch. Our senses are what write the story of who we are. Now, another really key thinker, Francis Bacon, he basically warned everyone that our minds are full of glitches. He called them the 4 idols. So you have the idols of the tribe. These are the bugs in our human hardware, like our tendency to see patterns that aren't really there. Then there are the idols of the cave. Those are our personal biases, from our own little bubble. The idols of the marketplace. That's all about how language trips us up. Think about how a word like freedom can mean totally different things to different people. And finally, the idols of the theater. These are the big, flawed belief systems we just accept without questioning them. Bacon's point was, if you want to think clearly, you first have to spot these roadblocks in your own head. And this is where it all starts to come together. Section 3, Designing a New Society. This is where things get really interesting, because we're going to see how these abstract thinking tools were used to totally rethink and redesign the very idea of government and society itself. So if you're going to redesign society, you first have to imagine what life would be like without it. They called this the state of nature. And Thomas Hobbes, well, he had a pretty grim take on it. He argued that without a powerful ruler to keep us all in check, life would just be a chaotic war of all against all, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So that's the problem political philosophy had to solve. The solution they came up with was a social contract. But boy, did they disagree on the terms and conditions. Hobbes, he said we needed an absolute monarch, basically a king with total power to save us from ourselves. But Locke totally disagreed. He argued that we're born with natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and that government's only job is to protect those rights. And then you have Rousseau, who took it even further. He wanted a direct democracy that would follow the general will of the people. And these weren't just theories for a classroom. These were the actual blueprints for modern democracy.
John Locke gave us the radical idea that we have a right to overthrow a tyrannical government. Montesquieu gave us the separation of powers, legislative, executive, judicial, to make sure no one person gets too much control. And Rousseau championed popular sovereignty, the idea that the real power belongs to the people. Sound familiar? Yeah, it really should.
So for our final section, let's track that legacy. We're going to see how these incredible ideas jumped off the page and right into the streets, changing the course of human history forever. And you can literally watch the dominoes fall on this timeline. 1690, Locke publishes his ideas. 1762, Rousseau publishes his. And then just a few years later, boom, the American Revolution in 1776, boom, the French Revolution in 1789. You can't deny the connection. These ideas were the dynamite for those revolutions. Let's just pause on that date for a second. 1789. This is the year the French Revolution exploded. This was a direct attempt to put all those Enlightenment ideals into practice. The goal was to tear down that old world of kings and nobles and build something new, a society governed by and for the people. It was violent, it was messy, but it was philosophy in action. And here's the real takeaway. This stuff is still with us. The core beliefs of the Enlightenment are basically baked into the DNA of our modern world. Our belief in the individual, the idea that there's an objective reality we can figure out with science, and this deep-down faith that humanity can and will get better, those ideas still shape everything from our laws to our labs. But of course, the story doesn't just stop there. The Enlightenment's almost total faith and reason got pushback. You had movements like Romanticism that said, hey, what about emotion and intuition? And much later, you had postmodernism, which started questioning whether objective reality is even a thing we can know. So its legacy is huge, but it's also complicated and still debated. And that kind of leaves us with this one big question. The Enlightenment gave us the toolkit to build our world on a foundation of reason. It gave us science, democracy, human rights. But when you look around at the world today, you have to wonder, is reason enough? Thanks for joining me on this